Well, hey friends, and welcome back to another episode of MercyTalk. We're so pumped to be back with you guys, and I'm joined by my two friends and cohorts, Julian, I'm pointing to him in a box, and Aaron. This is so fun to do this. Hey guys.
Hey everyone.
Hi. I should say hi. Hello.
Yes.
Aaron Gentry here.
This is always the part of the show where we're like, you wait, and it's especially interesting when you're not in the same room and you've got like
Right.
the tech delays and all of, anyways, by now everybody is an expert at Zoom etiquette, or at least what to expect with Zoom. So thank you for your grace and patience. But we are so pumped to dive into what is going to be, for right now, the last episode regarding emotions, using the resource from Chip Dodd, which we have really loved utilizing. And it's a great book if you get a chance to go out and get it. We've all kind of been plugging it. It's called Voice of the Heart. And his counseling center that he founded, and that's incredible resource, is here actually in the Middle Tennessee area. It's called Sage Hill. And they have some wonderful resources, including a rad podcast, like very, very insightful. So if you get a chance to check it out, it's super, super good. But I'd say like this whole thing has been surprising in some respects. Like some of these emotions that I assumed were going to be really heavy, they actually were kind of, it was kind of delightful, not delightful, but it was surprising in a good way to discover that there is something on the other side of that. I'd say, especially for me, like loneliness was one. We talked about this not too long ago, just that, that loneliness to be with the Lord, that loneliness to be with others, even with yourself, and then creatively to make and express. I thought that was such a great kind of like prompting that when, hey, you feel this way, stop and ask yourself, what is it that I am searching for, hungry for, seeking for, instead of getting lost in the opposite of solitude, which is isolation. And anyways, we could go on about that, but I'd love to know from you.
You got to say, Julian didn't call it isolation. He called it isolation.
That's right. With a little I.
Little
that's
flashback.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
but I want to know from y'all, what do y'all think?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I think I echo your takeaway, Rachel, because in terms of like reframing how we think about loneliness, the cool thing about this series is hopefully our listeners have been positioned to work toward reclaiming a lot of the emotions that typically seem as if they only have negative connotations, as if they only have negative implications. And while a lot of these emotions that we've been kind of unpacking can, while they can potentially be rooted in negative origins, and then result in negative symptoms, the emotions themselves, I don't know, there's been a really cool prompting or exercise to reclaim them within the context of Scripture and how God intended those emotions to be lived out in our lives. And again, I hope it's not a cop-out, but I want to piggyback off what you said, Rachel. The loneliness episode was one that really just kind of resonated with me, and for a lot of different reasons, but I think I mentioned this in that episode, but being an extrovert, it just kind of forced me to reframe this whole idea of loneliness. And hopefully that a lot of our listeners can begin to work toward reclaiming a lot of these emotions, particularly loneliness.
That's a good,
you're talking about that reclaiming. I don't know if I would have put those words to it before, but I think that's exactly what I've been able to do through this series. This one's been very timely for me personally. We're not just talking about this podcast stuff and not doing it ourselves. And so I think I've been very open on the podcast that I do not love emotions. And so this has been really, really timely. I felt, everyone's laughing. Love you too.
So we love you. I mean, we're with you.
Yeah, it's real. But let me say, I felt this invitation. I don't know if it's because it's quarantine time or not, but I felt this invitation recently, the last few weeks, from the Lord to go deeper with him in relationship. And I don't know if this quite makes sense, but this series seems to be opening up opportunity for that wasn't there before, because I didn't realize I was defaulting to these impaired emotions that actually repel relationship. And so learning to sit in these emotions, even, they're not negative, they're neutral. So then I don't have to feel bad about being in them.
Sure.
Then as I sit in them, I'm able to find this deeper place of relationship with the Lord, with others. So it's been very impactful for me. I'm not going towards those numbing emotions anymore. Or if I do, I can identify it quickly. Like,
yes.
Oh, okay, that was isolation. That wasn't solitude, like we've been talking about. I mean, it's just been really, really good. It's providing me a lot of time. Quarantine. I have a lot of time in quarantine.
Yeah.
To do that. So it's been really impactful for me personally.
Yeah.
I'm going to real quick add one last thing, if that's okay, if I might, Rachel. Aaron, you just reminded me that one of the things I confronted while we were going through this series is the reminder that we're all image bearers, and if we ever feel like we're unraveling or like we're suffocating under the weight of a particular emotion, I think it would do us all best to pause and remember that we are created in God's image. Our emotions are of God. What's important, though, is to not stay angry or to not stay fill in the blank, but understanding that, hey, I'm an image bearer. Like, do I actually understand the implications of that? That's huge. What an honor. We're all image bearers of God. Like, that's huge.
And not image bearers once we get our act together. But we're image bearers. We have it in us now. The things that we're experiencing, if we experience them, in a good way, they do show God.
That's
right. That's good.
Yeah, no, that's so good. I love that. I love how that, even you saying that point, Julian, just reminds me that he is made as a whole person, body, heart, soul, mind. And Jesus addresses the whole person, not just, hey, what you can do by your own, in your own physical strength, or, what it looks like when you have everything all together. Anyways, I just love that. So again, referencing kind of what you said, Aaron, we're learning this stuff right along with everybody else. Like, I mean, hello, we're all in quarantine as well, but regardless of that, we're all, in different ways, journeying with Jesus and learning some of these same things. So today is no exception. I really am excited, about where this is going to go, because gladness is the emotion that we're going to focus on today. And if you go, hallelujah, praise the Lord, no more sad emotions. Let me just
sigh of relief,
man. Let me just warn you that this one was way surprising. And I know I've said that probably about every single one, because we're not talking about, and Julian will get more into this in a minute, we're not talking about like happiness. We're not talking about like that psyched feeling when you drive up to your favorite burger place, even though that does make me happy. And that sounds delicious right now. We're not talking about that feeling you get when, your favorite show is having the finale. This is something deeper, richer, built over time, and actually something that cannot be built without weathering these other emotions. So Aaron, would you kind of mind setting up what is gladness? Because everyone's like, yes, happiness, here we go. Finally something right.
No, I am so up for setting this up. You might think, do you really need to unpack gladness? Isn't it just, being glad? No, it is so much more. You're so right, Rachel. It's been so cool to learn about. And I will say, if you take the time to listen to what we're going to talk about today, pulling from Chip Dodd's material on gladness, it will be less elusive to you. Yeah. When you unpacked gladness, it becomes less elusive. Anyways, here we go. Gladness is defined by Chip Dodd as a state of possibility. It's the capability to live life on life's terms without moving into the impaired emotions. So ultimately, it's bearing life well in a variety of circumstances. If you haven't talked about gladness a lot, maybe in a Christian context, you might call this joy. Could be another thing you can relate it to, because joy also not dependent on our circumstances all of the time. Now, you can be glad in good and bad circumstances, so don't want to get that confused. You don't have to be miserable to experience gladness.
Right.
You can also be having good experiences and experience gladness. But let's keep moving. The next thing to mention, and this may sound confusing at first as well, gladness is a derivative feeling, which means that in order to experience it, you must first learn to deal with and process the other feelings we've talked about. Some of those that you may say are more negative. We are totally with Chip Dodd, though, neutral feelings, solidarity. Some of the feelings like sadness, loneliness, anger, fear that we talked about. To experience gladness, you will likely go through a lot of these other emotions maybe first, or process those well to access gladness. It comes from learning to move through these emotions well. And Chip Dodd explains that to do this, this one's going to be hard. It means being dependent. We all love being dependent on others and not on ourselves. But it does. It means being dependent, because in being dependent, you are expressing your needs to others. You're being dependent on God, expressing your needs to Him in a healthy way to those around you, expressing your, you don't want to be codependent on other people, but in a healthy way, being dependent on other people, expressing our needs. We see this, you won't believe where, in the Bible. Always. What do you know? Pull in. It's like,
wasn't expecting
God
that.
knew. What do you know? Okay, words of Jesus. This is in the Beatitudes in Matthew 5:3. Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." This is like humility, being humble in that you need things. And I would say that those who are humble, those who are poor in spirit, when they express their needs, they do see the kingdom of heaven, not later, but right now on earth, because their needs are met.
Amen.
And that's the kingdom of heaven, that all of our needs would be met. And so you can't experience that without being dependent on others. And in that dependence, you'll find gladness by being dependent, by being honest with your emotions. We talked about that as a practical takeaway a few weeks ago, being honest with how you're feeling. So the alternative to being honest and open is to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, do it all on our own, and our attempts to experience joy-filled, peaceful lives. We try to live in this full gladness on our own power without going through these other emotions, but instead, my guess is you'll fall into the impaired emotion, which I don't want to talk about, so somebody else will have to talk about the impaired emotion.
Nice segue.
Yes,
yeah.
No, like of a surprise for me, and I'm sure it has for a lot of you guys, and that's probably because a lot of us have associated gladness with feelings of happiness, excitement, thrill. A lot of these things are counterfeit, are passing. They don't have a lot of depth to them. But however, gladness is multi-layered. We have to remember that it is a multi-layered state that we have to understand. So let's start with what it's not, or again, as Chip Dodd refers to as the impaired version, like Aaron hinted at. And then we'll pivot and look into the gift that it's trying to lead us toward. So in his book, Voice of the Heart, Chip shares that impaired gladness is sensual activity without the heart being fully present. So let's unpack that. Chip talks in his book about being full-hearted in life. And that means that you have fully faced and processed your own feelings, fears, thoughts, etc. But he says that if you don't live full-hearted or full-heartedly in this way, you will, like any human, still want to live fully. But the way that you'll try and do that will be to live in excess through other means. So, whether that's, your stomach, your diet, or via sexual means, or really any kind of other avenue or path toward achieving a temporary high or fix. It's really basically the lust of the flesh in a nutshell. Now that part shouldn't come as a surprise, because we know that people can be sexually involved and not experience what true intimacy is. And conversely, so many of us know that, we can eat until we're stuffed, but never have that feeling of being fully replete or satisfied, if you will. And it's, this one is especially the food one. I'm a foodie. I'm sure a lot of people listening here, and it's okay to be an appreciator of fine cuisine. But I have noticed that, and it's something that I would have never described myself as, or described myself as having a weakness or a bent toward this. But I run to food for safety more often than I think I realized. And preparing for this particular podcast forced me to like evaluate that as I was looking for, some kind of anecdote to share along with this point. And so I wonder how many of you listening to this episode resonate with that. That, and it's so easy, and it feels like it's a sneaky way that the enemy can lure us into depending on something other than God, because God created food. God created, so on its surface, it seems like it shouldn't be this thing that we're necessarily abusing. But for me, far too often, it's become a place where I've run to experience counterfeit.
That's good. You're
gladness.
using it as a replacement.
Exactly.
So where you would have sought relationship,
yes,
you seek it instead.
Exactly. Especially within the context of a marriage. Sometimes it's easier to run away from the problem and address it head on with your partner and just, have a fix with some food or whatever, a midnight snack, whatever it may be. And it becomes anti-relational, like you're saying, Erin. So real quick, last thing, we referenced this earlier, but it's important to remember why gladness and happiness are not the same thing. And in fact, happiness, the word happiness actually comes from the word happens, which means exactly that it happens. It's not necessarily a consistent thing. Whereas gladness, on the other hand, can actually be experienced in the midst of pain. And I so appreciate Erin unpacking that earlier. So you're glad, for example, that your kids are growing up, but maybe you miss or long for when they were younger. Or maybe, you're really excited and happy when you've graduated from college. But you find yourself missing and longing for that particular season in your life. So that's an important distinction to kind of keep at the forefront of your mind throughout this entire conversation of gladness. That distinction is really important.
Yeah, I mean, that distinction. And Julian, thank you so much for just diving in about separating that impaired emotion and bringing an awareness to it. I think it's okay for us all to take a step back. You're not evil for having experienced sensuality apart from your heart. You're not evil. You're human, and taking a moment just to say, okay, that was not me experiencing myself as a whole person. That was me cutting off one part of me, maybe the physical part, and letting myself try to experience some form of gladness through that. I would say during quarantine, it's unlikely that any of us have gotten away without doing that at least once in some form.
Well, bless it.
I already mentioned my Netflix binge, so we don't have to go about that again.
When Julian was talking about food, I was like, feeling the heat over here, brother. Okay. Did you read my mail?
Yeah. Well, it's real. It's real. And yes, all those things, food can be good. It just, every time you eat, you're not evil. Every time you watch Netflix, not evil. But it's just assessing why you're going towards that, and are you going towards it for a negative reason. So
that's right.
We'll keep going in. Let's get back to happiness. Let's get back, not happiness, gladness. Different from happiness. Positive side of gladness. We're going to talk about the gift that gladness has to offer us. So each of these emotions, we've gone through them. They have an impaired version that we just talked about, and the gift. And a lot like Julian was just mentioning, the gift that gladness has to offer us is joy with sadness. You're like, is that what Julian just said? Yes. Joy with sadness. It's those combination things that you can experience, a celebration while you're also sad for what's being lost. Like he was mentioning with kids going away to college, you also have to mourn all the years that they're no longer going to be in childhood. Those are gone, and that's okay. They were good, and it's good for them to be gone. It's good for the kids to be grown, but it's okay to be sad about that. That means you're accepting life on life's terms. When you say, I can be glad and sad knowing that this part is done. Let's keep digging into that, because I still feel a little confused as I'm even talking about it. I think like we just said, we can agree that life is a mixture of happiness and sadness, highs and lows. And we just talked about that example. I want to use one more example, just again, to try to bring clarity. So for me, I would say that I experienced gladness when I got this job here in the outreach department. Woo! So I'd already worked somewhere else at Mercy Multiplied, and in changing positions at work, I applied for another job and I got it, which I was super glad about. And in that, I also was experiencing some sadness because it meant changing positions at work. It meant leaving my old team. And I had to mourn that changing relational dynamic, that I wouldn't see them each day. And so in that, I was glad. I had the joy of getting my new position, but I also had to walk through that sadness. And when I did those together, it was gladness, because I was living life how it actually was, not how I felt it should be. Another thing, I feel like this is a setup. I'm so sorry. I have to do it.
Hey, do it. Go for it.
Inside Out, y'all.
I need
Inside
it.
Out.
This movie.
The movie. I have to say it. You know those little memory orbs that they have in Inside Out? She has these little memory orbs. And at the beginning, when she's younger, they all start out just one color. They're either joy or their anger or their disgust or their sadness. They have all one color. But then at the end of the movie, they become multiple colors. I think that's the perfect visual for this, that joy and sadness, that joy with sadness, that blue and yellow orb. So then, you know, at the end, we see the main character. She's sad initially after she lost the game, but it's that sadness that leads to her parents comforting her and her team celebrating her. And so then that becomes a memory that is joy and sadness together.
That's good.
So I think that can be a good way to say this. Like I said, it's living life on life's terms, this gladness that we're talking about, highs and lows. Basically, it's saying it's not always okay, but I'm okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Not always okay, but I'm okay.
But I'm okay. That's good. And I think one thing that has helped with that clarifying piece for me is, you know, that homesick feeling you get sometimes, especially as a believer, going, man, this moment feels so good and it feels so right. Why can't it always be this way? Like, why can't it always, why can't we always, you know, feel like it's a reunion, or, you know, like friends coming over and eating and staying till however late or whatever. But I think the idea there is, and Chip talks about this too, is that we're not home yet. And so we do have this internal longing to be where we were made to be. And so experiencing that, you know, that gladness, almost, you know, really that bittersweet of, this is beautiful and I love it, but why can't life be like that all the time? Wait, because I'm not home yet, you know, in a sense. So that kind of made sense. But hey girl, use all the Inside Out analogies, because we love Disney, you know, we love movies, and I especially love Inside Out. It's one of my favorites. But on that same line, I guess what has been interesting with this whole gladness thing, especially in this situation we're in, I had a light bulb moment this week prepping for this podcast. And we've been talking about Philippians 4 kind of woven all throughout. And when I started reading about sadness and gladness and joy, even in the midst of pain, it was like Philippians 4 kind of came to life in a new way. And I just sensed the Spirit saying, that's what I can do. I've learned the secret of being content and in every situation, in every circumstance. That's what we're talking about here. That's the kind of joy. That's the kind of gladness. And I thought, oh my gosh, yes, Lord, like teach me that. Teach me that even in this chaos, or what feels like, you know, the situation that I would not have wished upon the world, Lord, teach me that I can still find contentment, because if I have nothing else, I have the best thing, and that's you. And the other thing that has been really good in this too is just this remembrance, I guess, that gladness in the midst of pain or sorrow is going to cultivate gratitude, or it can cultivate gratitude if we allow it to, you know. And that's such a game changer too. And that's even what Paul was doing, is saying, hey, I may not have this, but I've got the most important thing, and that's Jesus. And so I have been convicted to look at my life this week and go, okay, I don't have this anymore. This isn't regular. We all, you know, just want to, well, I say we all, I'm assuming, but I know a lot of us would be okay with like a big group hug right now.
Yeah.
But all that to say, at the end of the day, we still have many things that we can be grateful and thankful for, and actually dwelling on those and saying those out loud and writing that down helps to cultivate that gladness in our hearts. So
Yeah.
I would just love to know, I know, Julian, you're going to kind of bring us into this practical piece, but I don't know if
Yeah.
that resonated with any of y'all, but
It does, and honestly, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't read that scripture.
yeah, would you do that for us?
That you referenced. Yeah, Philippians 4:11, verses 11 through 13. Paul says, "I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances." Verse 12, "I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want." And finally, verse 13, "I can do all this through him who gives me strength." Just love that. I just, we can't reference that passage and not, read it, even if very quickly. With that being said, here's the big practical takeaway. That's the through line for all of our Mercy Talk episodes, having some kind of practical takeaway for our listeners. Here you go, guys. This week, we want you to grab a pen and a paper, and honestly, an even more ideal situation would be having a notebook or something, or a journal that you can have, whether on your person or at your nightstand, something that is intentional. So with just a simple college ruled line sheet of paper that you might have a tendency to just lose track of it or maybe toss it. So be intentional about whatever it is that you're grabbing to jot this down with. But what you're going to do is make 2 columns. And in the first column, we want you to list out things that have been particularly hard for you in this season. And the second column is going to be specific things that you are grateful for. And we'd even say things that have caught you by surprise that you're grateful for. So really anything. There doesn't have to necessarily be this huge qualifier for these things that you're grateful for. Honestly, it can be Trader Joe's ice cream. It can be that you got to FaceTime your niece. Whatever it is, we don't want to put a qualifier on this thing or these things that you're going to be particularly grateful for. So keep that in mind, but have easy access to this notebook or this list. And every time throughout this next week, really commit to a week that you experience moments of wanting to escape your current situation. Write that down. Whatever it is that you're experiencing in that moment that is particularly hard, write it down. And then conversely, in the next column, write down something that you're grateful for in that exact moment as well. This is a really, really good exercise, even beyond being in this time of quarantine where things seem, particularly difficult. I know for me, having a journal and journaling is a very cathartic but real way that I can experience God's felt nearness, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm never more aware of just how good our Father is than when I'm in the practice of writing down all of the ways in which he has blessed me and my family and my loved ones. I mean, what a radical, awesome way to experience his goodness.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's good, Julian.
And Julian, I'm so glad that you mentioned that. You said that it's not just inside quarantine, but outside of it too. This whole session that we've been having on gladness in quarantine, it applies outside of quarantine as well. It's a great tool. Our whole emotional health series, it applies to both ways.
That's right.
And it's been a great series to go through. I've loved talking about emotional health. If you haven't listened to the other podcasts that we did earlier in the month of April, check them out. They are good. Yes, you might think, oh, but it was a negative emotion. No, it is positive because there's a gift it has to offer you. I'll say one more thing before I officially close us out. Just was on my mind to say that while we're talking about gladness on this podcast, you can still experience happiness too.
Yes.
We weren't saying happiness is bad.
No.
We were just saying gladness is not happiness. It's not dependent on what happens. So if something really great does happen, be happy about it. But if you're walking through some of these other different emotions, you can also have gladness as you walk through those. So just wanted to throw that in. Before we go, if you have not seen, you can stay up to date with everything that's going on with MercyTalk, with everything that's going on with the outreach department, which is who hosts MercyTalk at Mercy Multiplied. You can do all of that through Mercy's Instagram. That's right. Mercy Outreach now has an Instagram account. It's Mercy_outreach. We would love to have you following us. We hope you guys have a great week. And when you get to that Instagram, you'll also see that we're hosting a Keys to Freedom boot camp every week. We still have 5 more weeks of that boot camp, so you can see that on there too. Have a great week. May God bless you. Join us next month for another great series here on MercyTalk.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.